Okay, so prepare to watch your screen go nuts. Good morning, all. We're going to give it a couple minutes, maybe just like a minute and 60 seconds while people are just connecting and folks coming in from the waiting room. But thank you for being here this morning. All right, I have 1 minute past, so I'm at least going to start with our opening remarks and introductions. We did, as a committee, decide for the first 5 minutes of an interview, we will allow anyone into the waiting room. After 5 minutes, we will then hold all those participants in the waiting room so that it's not an additional distraction for those of us already in conversation. But good morning and welcome. You have joined the PCN School Board Candidate Committee. We are grateful to have Christina Frey here with us this morning as our first candidate to have a conversation with. We thought we might skip a lot of the history of PCN since Christina's already well aware of our group, but just want to give kind of general opening remarks. The School Board Candidate Committee represents families from across the district. We all have children at varying ages and at varying schools across the district, so you've got a great mix of parents who have been involved in our school community for quite some time. We have a series of questions that we will go through with each candidate, each being asked the same question, and we will each take a turn asking those questions. Christina, for your background at the very end, we will allow you some additional time to share any closing remarks.
Sarah, I think you went on mute accidentally.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Stacia. Not sure where I left off, but at the end, Christina, you'll have time for closing comments. We do ask, and I think it looks like we are good. Anyone who is on the call, we do ask that you make sure that your full name is present and visible on the Zoom screen. So if we cannot identify you by name, we will ask to do so in the chat and help you figure out how to make that change. So without further ado, my name is Sarah Strawbridge. I have 2 boys at Fox Hill Elementary School, and I'm going to turn it over to Stacia to get our questions started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stacia Murphy, and I have a 6th grader at West Lane and formerly at Fox Hill Elementary. And I believe our first question is really for you to identify who you are and give us your name and give us your connections to the district.
Sure. So fellow Fox Hill and West Lane person here. My name is Christina Fry. I have a daughter who's now a freshman at North Central. I just have the one. We went through all the way through Fox Hill, kindergarten through 5th, and then through West Lane. And now we're very happy to be at North Central. So that's kind of my my family connection. I've just been very involved in the district from day one. I always used to joke, I actually came to a parent council meeting before my daughter even started, because I was so interested in the legislative. It was the legislative forum the year before she was in kindergarten, because a friend told me about it, and I was very interested in that. So I jumped into parent council from day one, and then joined the board after that first year. So I was on the parent council board up through 2020 with 2 years as president. I actually ran this committee for the last 2 cycles prior to this. So I don't do like PTO boards, but I do always like volunteer at the specific events. I kind of focused more on parent council. I've been to more school board meetings than I can count. I've run a couple of school board campaigns. Some of you know, I actually was one of the attorneys on Don Kite's appeal regarding the situation that happened in 2018. So let's see, I think that's about the extent of mine. Oh, and I'm sorry, I was on referendum committees for the 2 referenda. And I will say, I'll brag a little bit here. For the 2020 referendum, I agreed to be the like absentee voter and like election day volunteer chair, and then COVID, and that I agreed to that like in January 2020, and then COVID hit, and then 90% of the campaign became absentee outreach. So I took that on during COVID, and I will always hold up this number. 14,200 is the number of handwritten postcards, not that I did personally, but that I coordinated with my committee to get done and mailed out to all those absentee voters. As a committee, we were really proud of that. I was really proud of that. And I do think it shows my commitment to the district.
Wonderful. And last piece of that question that I forgot to say is, why are you running?
Well, I think I answered this in the written application a little bit. Honestly, I've sort of thought, okay, someday I will, right? Because I have done so much with the district over the years. I sort of felt like, okay, this is something I do want to do at some point. And having kind of run this committee and been involved with campaigns for 4 cycles now, I know that like there aren't always lots of good people raising their hand. School board's a huge commitment. And so I kind of said, well, I want to run someday when it's the right time, and this year, I believe it's kind of a era shift for the district with kind of moving on from referendum. But the reality is I live in the right district, kind of in the right year at the right time. I know the incumbent is running again, but I also, part of the reason I said, hey, I do think this is the time is I think this is going to be a really unfriendly year to incumbents. Because not through fault of their own necessarily, but because between the COVID school closures and mask mandates and things, and then between the change in school start times, any incumbent, no matter how they voted on those issues, is going to kind of automatically have this group of people out there who's mad at them for that. And also just the political climate in the world at large, I don't think is very friendly to kind of somebody who's already served 16 years. So and that's not any criticism of Don. I think he's been a good board member. But in my looking at running, I said, even though there is an incumbent who may run again, I really do think that this is the right time, not just for me to run, but this is the right time that I feel that the district needs me as the candidate on the ballot and on the board. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacia. Christina, could you share with us, how are you upholding our district's vision around diversity, equity, and inclusion? And building off of that, how do you plan to support and advance this vision moving forward?
Well, I think, the way I uphold that, and I hope this answer is okay, because I'm not going to talk directly about what I do in the district, but the way I uphold those values personally is through my work. I am a public defender. I work in juvenile court. I have done, I represent parents who have DCS cases. And prior to that, I represented teenagers who were charged with crimes. And that's my full-time job. That's all I do. I make very little money doing it. I could make a lot more money in private practice or with the firm. But again, that is a choice I went back to law school at 36 to do this work. And the reason I do this work is because I believe in trying to help our marginalized communities of all different types of marginalization, both race as well as, income and socioeconomic status, to help them navigate a system that is not built for them, and to actually be a person who advocates for them and comes along beside them and sometimes fights with them against that system that is very much working against them. So that is, I think, the biggest way that I can kind of give an example of, the way that I live those values every single day. It's a very conscious choice that I make to do that. Unfortunately, well, first of all, basically all my clients, well, I'm a public defender, but basically all my clients are poor, right? Basically, and almost every client who comes into this system qualifies for public defender. And unfortunately, there are some significant disparities in race, in the statistics on, the number of Black families who will be involved in child welfare and whatnot are really, really appalling. So, that's how in my just day-to-day life, I feel I've made some pretty powerful choices that demonstrate my commitment, to equity. And, in terms of the district, I think some of I've been a huge public education advocate. I don't know if we're going to kind of talk about that stuff later. Speaking at the State House, speaking out, about the importance of supporting our public schools. And some of you also know, sometimes I can take a little personally when people choose to, go to private schools or whatever. But part of that is, one of the big reasons I am so passionate about that is because I do believe that we need communities together, right? We can't, that it doesn't benefit our communities to have people kind of separated off, right? And we know, for example, one of the reasons I'm opposed to charter schools is because they're basically the new segregation academies, so just in terms of kind of education specifically, I think a lot of my motivation in some of my political advocacy has been because of my concern about how it affects equity for everybody when we start branching off our school district into, oh, this school's right for you, and don't you want this Reggio model that attracts these kind of parents? That's a lot of my motivation for supporting traditional community public schools, is because I strongly believe that is how our best, right now, our best method of providing equity in education. Now, we've work to do, obviously, in our traditional public schools to improve that there. But so anyway, that's, in terms of education, I think that's how I'm upholding it there.
That's great. Thank you, Christina. I'm going to hand it over to Terrence now.
Good morning, Christina. I apologize. I can't seem to get my camera to work here, but the question I have, well, first, I have two kids that have come through Washington Township currently. I have a daughter who graduated from North Central and a son who's a senior at North Central this year. But the question I have is, we devalue diverse populations within the district. How can we create more equitable outcomes for minority students so the outcomes match up with our strengths and diversity?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start my answer by saying I think some of those answers come from a much higher level. I'm not a PhD in education or in sociology and whatnot. So to be honest, I'm not going to come in here and tell you, I know, here's 3 solutions. Here's how we can, tackle this equity issue. Because the reality is, Terrence and everybody, I don't know. I can't sit here, and I'm not going to pretend to know. And I think, unfortunately, if we look at even kind of some of the things that schools and that schools already are doing, and that organizations and companies and whatnot are doing around DEI initiatives and DEI directors, I think that's, I 100% support those things. And I think we need to be doing those things. But the reality is, I think even if we look at those things, we're still trying to figure those out, right? I personally, I think if you talk to Dr. EBR, she'd say, hey, here's some great things we can do. But have we cracked the code of the opportunity gap yet? I don't think anybody really has. So I think that's the first thing that's important. And I bring all that up because, Washington Township gets kind of attacked for the opportunity gap a lot, and it's there, and we need to do better. But I feel like sometimes the people who attack us for that, they think we can just, oh, if we just do this, it would fix it. And they don't acknowledge the real complexity of that issue, and the fact that every school and every organization, everybody everywhere is struggling with that issue. So I'll preface it with that. And then to more directly answer, I mean, I think the things that we are already doing, that Dr. EBR is leading, the cultural competency trainings that we've done, it used to be called Undoing Racism. I forget what it's called now, at Child Advocates. Interrupting Racism, I think it is. I think all those are good and important, and I support us doing those. I think also another thing I think we do well for the most part, and to be quite frank, maybe we do better job at it at the lower grade levels, is I do think that being individualized to the students is important, right? I mean, because there's sort of systemic things you need to do. But then there's also, the individual level things. And I do know, because I've seen it, especially at the elementary level. I mean, they have these meetings where they literally sit down and they look at the data on every single student, and they say, oh, okay, overall their math NWEA looks like this, but oh, there's like this subcategory of it. And so what do we need to be doing to make sure that student comes up in that subcategory? I do think those things are very important too. And I certainly am not one to say we need to do everything by the numbers, but also following data and paying attention to data is important. And so I think, my best answer is we need to combine kind of what we're doing at that systemic level with continuing to attempt to really intervene with kids kind of one-on-one at that level. And quite frankly, I'll be honest, I think probably just based on my personal experience, I'm not, administration may want to stand up and correct me here, but just from my personal experience and what I see, I think in the district, we do a better job of that at the elementary level. And some of that is just a numbers issue, right? In terms of how many students you have. I do think we need to look at how to do more of that at the high school level, because and again, from my work, from everything, it's like, that's when kids really slip through the cracks. And that's when I think it can become harder, right? Because they're not with one teacher all day who can, tailor things better. So I think we maybe have some work to do. And maybe the biggest thing I would say I would focus to kind of get at your answer question, Terrence, how do we address this? Is look at ways that we can do some kind of more of that individual data-driven intervention at the middle and high school levels.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I hope it got to it eventually.
Thanks.
Just want to let everyone know we have about 8 more minutes.
Karen, I think you were up next to ask the question.
Yep. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for being here.
No, I'm good. Thank you. I had 2 daughters that came through North Central, and I currently have a junior at North Central. Again, I'm Karen Bloomingbird. And what do you think are the highest priority topics right now that's facing our district?
Well, gosh, I think honestly, I'm going to say for the very highest priority, I'm going to call it a kind of equal between equity issues and staffing and the teacher shortage. I think those are the 2 that pop really right up to the top of my head. You want me to expand on that?
Well, and I wanted to, but we only have 8 minutes left, and I know we have a couple more questions, but if you can be brief as far as equity, that is very important.
Okay. So, the question was kind of what are some of the top issues? I mean, and so in equity, it is the gap, right? It is what percentage of our Black students are graduating versus our white students? What percentage of our, Hispanic students are graduating versus our white students, and versus our overall population? Our Burmese students, So, I mean, I think to summarize the issue, and I guess this kind of comes at how would I look at to try to figure out if we're making progress? Again, we kind of have, that's where we go back to the data, and we do look at, okay, what are those graduation rates? What are those median GPAs? I don't love standardized tests and SATs and whatnot, but at least for shorthand, right? I mean, if one subgroup is testing significantly lower on a test than another one, even if we don't love the test, it's still probably, telling us something. So, I mean, to kind of just expound a little bit, in terms of what is the issue with equity, I mean, ultimately, it's are we giving all students what they need to reach the outcomes we want them to reach, which is graduating and being post-secondary ready or career ready and being good citizens of the world, so does that give you enough expounding?
Yes, that's good enough. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure, thank you.
Hi, Christina. Thanks for joining us. I'm Greg Aiken and I have a daughter at North Central and a son that graduated through the Allison Bill Eastwood North Central track. One of our, I know is a concern for a lot of families is school safety, and just wondering like, how can we make sure students feel safe at school, and are things that you would recommend to make schools safer or improve in this area?
Sure. This is actually something I've thought about a lot. In terms of making students feel safer and making families feel that their students are safe, honestly, I think the number one thing we can do is better communication. Better and more transparent communication. I think that's improved. Having a daughter at North Central, I feel like the reaction to the situations that were happening yesterday. I mean, I felt like that email went out fairly quickly. It was, pretty good at sort of just, calming things down. So honestly, I think, the biggest thing we can do, and I'll talk about why I don't think some of the other things people think about are what I support, is that transparent communication, right? We should not have, for example, and if there's administrators here, they probably won't like me very much for saying this, but we should not have emails going out saying that there were only verbal altercations and then parents seeing Snapchats that show physical altercations, right? It's things like that. Those are, clear communication, quite frankly, I think is the number one thing we can do. And sometimes I think the communication is delayed or comes off kind of defensive, and it's not an easy thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I would do it perfectly if I were, in charge of everything, but truly that's what I think we need. We need to be honest and acknowledge, like, this is terrible when something happens. I mean, certainly there was the horrible incident last year, and I feel like sometimes the communication is a lot more like nothing to see here than, hey, this was scary and this happened, but let's talk about, maybe why it wasn't quite as scary as you think, and whatever. So that's really the number one thing I think we need to improve. In terms of, I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the rest of your question, but I'll share my general thoughts on school safety. I do not support metal detectors in schools. I know I know people are going to disagree with me on that, and that's just fine. But I personally don't. I have no interest in having my daughter go to a school that feels more like a prison. I visit prisons, not my thing. I think the other thing, I think we do have good SROs. I think we do have good staff. They jump on things right away. I think I know we're down a bunch of deans right now, and I am concerned about that. I am concerned about how staffing may impact safety. So, I mean, that's certainly one thing we do need to address, although nobody has the magic solution to that. One thing I will say I really like, and I really like that the administration has been pushing it more, is that kind of hotline. And I'm sorry, I forget what it's called, but I used it, actually. I used it like a week ago because my daughter, thankfully, she saw somebody on social media share some pictures of a kid with guns. And she brought that to my attention. And like, I was, we weren't even 100% sure who this kid was. It was like somebody she knew shared it. But you know what? I sent that into the tip line and was just like, hey, I don't know if this is anything. It's not a threat to anybody, but like, you know what? If this kid is a North Central kid, hey, wouldn't it be great if administration got to alert their parents? Did you know your kid's got guns all over his social media? I think those things are really key. And I do appreciate that the administration is pushing that more. And I hope we can all work together to really create a culture where people are willing to use it and do use it, because I do, Greg, again, getting back to the root of the question, I think that's key. And again, I work with these teenagers who are in kind of some of this stuff every day, and I also, have talked with the SROs and things like that over time. They really do monitor that stuff. And that stuff really is where a lot of the safety issues start. So if we can really develop that culture of, hey, when we see a kid, even in their personal life, posting guns on their Snapchat, we bring it to the school's attention, right? So that they can talk to the kids, so that they can talk to the parents, and we head some of this off long before it gets there, I think. And again, that's part of the reason I'm not all about, metal detectors and cops should have long range rifles because the hallways are long or any of that, because ultimately, I don't really think that's gonna make that big of a difference. What I do think is gonna make a difference are the things I talked about.
Rochelle, I'm sorry, I don't think we're gonna have time to get to your question. We're about 1 minute shy of when we need to be transitioning. So if I think Tawasha was going to wrap things up.
Yeah. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning.
I'm Tawasha Harper. I have a Wesleyan 7th grader. Just on behalf of the committee, we want to thank you for your time this morning. And then so after all of our interviews are conducted today, we will be deliberating as a committee, and then if there are any follow-up questions, then someone from the committee will reach out to you, and then we will provide our endorsement recommendation at the upcoming meeting on the 24th at the Parent Council Network. So if you have any questions in between now and then, please feel free to reach out to Crystal at the email that's been provided, and someone from the committee will make sure that we respond. Again, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your application for stepping up at such a time to run for school board, as you've said, when it may not be the most popular job, but it's definitely one of the most important jobs in the community. And if there's anything you'd like to leave with us for consideration, we'd ask that you do that. And then we thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I will just make, kind of one closing comment. And thank you to the committee, having done this for quite a while. Giving up your Saturday morning and the things leading up to this isn't fun. And I see a couple faces who are multi-time committee servers. So a special thank you to you guys. I feel I would be remiss if I don't point out, let's be honest, the elephant's in the room, right? I'm competing against Don Kite for this. I love Don. I've worked for Don. I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into campaigns and things. So it's an awkward situation. Okay. But what I really want to kind of leave the committee with is, as much as I adore, frankly, and respect Don Kite, part of the reason I stepped up is, if you really look, and if you look at down ballot races in our area, and it really became clear, even more clear, it already was clear, but with the precinct committee people, if you went through those results, the woman advantage is huge, and it's real. And is that right? Is that wrong? I don't know. But I do strongly believe that if a female runs as the sort of mind trust candidate, having a male being the candidate running against them is a big hurdle to overcome. Not saying it can't be overcome, but I think it is really important to just think about, and really make sure you look at that data and look at those election results. Even the most recent election for school board here, when you look at the differential in the results between the races, honestly, I am concerned for the matchup dynamics, right? If we did have a female reformer running. So, and that's nothing against Dawn. It's just unfortunate political realities, but I think it is a political reality that is important, and that needs to be considered. And quite frankly, is a political reality that was a big reason I said, hey, I think this is the right time for me. So that's all. Thank you so much. And I guess the last thing I'll say is just, I love Washington Township to the depths of my heart. Although I'm not afraid to, criticize, as you heard me do a little small criticisms today. But I love this district. And so I would do absolutely the best I could do to serve its interests and the kids' interests. Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, we have 4 people in the waiting room, including our next interview, who is Bill Turner. So I'm going to admit them.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I think we'll give it maybe 30 more seconds. I see a couple more connections on my end trying to connect. So just give it maybe 30 more seconds and we'll get started. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Bill. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Knowing your familiarity with PCN, we're going to save some time on our background and history and just welcome you here this morning. My name is Sarah Strawbridge. For your school board candidate committee, we are each taking turns asking questions. I can assure you that we all represent different ages of kiddos across the district, as well as representing different schools throughout the district as well. And so we're grateful for your time this morning. I will also alert you and others, we have decided to allow for the first 5 minutes. If anyone is in the waiting room, within that first 5 minutes, we'll let them in. After that, we will close the room just so it doesn't cause any additional distractions during our conversation. I think we'll get started. So to get started, Bill, we would appreciate if you could, again, just state your name for us, your connections to the district, if your kids attended, again, any other affiliations to Washington Township. And then again, just reiterate for us why you are running.
Sure,
and I forgot, I'm sorry. My kiddos go to Fox Hill.
Okay.
We were going to share where our kids go. So I have 2 boys at Fox Hill Elementary.
All right, great. Thank you, first of all, for this opportunity to talk to you and try to get your endorsement as I run for re-election again. So, Bill Turner, current school board member, Washington Township Schools. I'm gonna throw this out there, but 1978 graduate of North Central. So back when there was only 3 grades at North Central, still large school at that time. I have 3 daughters who all graduated, went through Washington Township Schools and graduated from North Central and on to bigger and better things. And I have a wife that teaches at Spring Mill Elementary. So still connected, one through the school board, through my wife still teaching, but also partly connected through the work that I do currently. I kind of touched on it in the application. But my work, I'm a chief program delivery officer for Marco Foundation. It's a private foundation out of New York, but the whole goal behind the Marco Foundation and the initiatives that I'm helping to run is that we try to focus on skills and competencies and get employers to do that so that folks can find jobs based on that versus degrees if they don't need it. If you do need a degree, we try to help folks find a pathway to the degree that fits their skill and competency. So how that ties to Washington Township is that we're a nonprofit, so there's nothing in it for Bill Turner. But one of the things that Washington Township has been doing is using our tools and resources as they try to hire folks. So that when they look for candidates that don't need a degree, or even if they do, they list the skills they want them to have, and that helps find people. The other side of that is that we can help students get on a better path for them that don't want to go to college or have no desire, or if they want to go to college, help them get on that career path that suits their skill set. So that's that. I'm still tied in from the district level, obviously as a school board member, but also from the work that I currently do. And I think I answered what you asked me to introduce on.
Yes, no, that's great. And then just if you could elaborate again, and we know it's in the application, but just, why you're choosing to run again, correct?
Sure. So those parents that either have just, got children into the Washington Township school system, or those that are high school students, or those that have graduated, over the past few years, you've seen Washington Township shift and start to do things. We're trying to do things differently to help with, the big word is the achievement gap. But there's other things in that achievement gap that we need to think about, though. But Washington Township is doing a lot of things, and our boards have over the years been trying to push and get that to happen the best way we think we can. I kind of want to see, I think we're starting to move the needle. It's not as fast as some would want, but we're starting to move the needle. And it's not a needle just about getting our Black and other minority students up. It's also about making sure that we still offer enough rigor that the students that perform well can still perform well and even do better. So it's a mix, right? And so I want to see us continue that work. And not to mention the fact that the construction that's going on, right? I think part of the community actually voted on it twice to give us the referendum dollars to do this work. It's not about seeing the end product of the building, but it's about making sure that, from my perspective, from what I'm trying to do with the board, is to make sure that not only do we complete the projects within budgets, but also that we help build up others along the way. So if you've listened to any board meeting or heard me talk about anything around the construction, I really push for supplier diversity. I really push for workforce development, and from a diverse perspective, getting people hired into these jobs that are on our campuses. And so I want to continue to do that work and then see how, and we're doing well, by the way, compared to other locations, let me tell you that part. But I just want to continue to see that work happen. And really, it's about helping all students grow. I'd rather use that term than achievement gap, but we want to make sure that all students grow at the fastest pace they can do.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Stacia now.
Hello, Bill. Good morning. I'm Stacia Murphy, and I have a son in West Lane, and his first year in Washington Township was last year at Fox Hill. You touched on some of this already, but can you expound on how you plan to continue to support and advance the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts?
Absolutely. So if one of the things that we did back in the first referendum, right off the bat, the board that was constituted at that time, I can't remember if I was president or not at that time, but as a member of the board, when we put out the bids for these contracts, one of the things that we did, and we actually, before the bids, if you look back, we created a resolution that created we wanted to make sure that when people came into the district to apply for these funds, as the owner of that money, we wanted to make sure that they had expectations around how they would be as far as supplier diversity, how they would be as far as who they hire on some of these jobs, et cetera. And one of the things in the resolution was that we created and we brought on a consultant to help folks find these diverse suppliers. So it wasn't, in the past, and I did a lot of verbal and reading research on construction and the reasons why minority suppliers don't get much business. There's a lot of complexities. I won't go into that. But what we did is we said, well, one of the things that happened to be a roadblock is that construction managers would say, we can't find these particular people. So we took that away. We created a platform where all diverse suppliers and any supplier that wants to work in Washington Township goes to this site and they put in their information and they get vetted. So we didn't want just, minority suppliers or XPEs as we call them. Anybody, you have to be, certified and able to do the job. So we would vet them and then give that list to construction managers or whoever's sending out the bids. The goal is to continue that. And if you look at our numbers, I can't think of the latest number, but I think out of the 300 million that we spent, I can't remember how many millions we spent, but there's about $100 million worth of diverse suppliers that have gotten contracts through this work. And our percentages of the diverse suppliers, XBEs, is very, very high compared to anywhere else you go. As a matter of fact, other districts and other entities are looking at what we're doing here to mirror that elsewhere. So my role going forward is to always be bringing that up. When we do great, I'm the first one, and you can go back to recordings. I'm on the board saying, hey, thanks, that's what we're talking about. Great work. And when they don't, it's like, hey, you got to do better. This, and sometimes I use, this isn't right, or that number is very bad. And they explain it, and then they come back the next time. So I just want to be that voice. The board agrees, but I typically I'm the louder voice on that than most.
Thank you so much. And I don't want to take too much time for this question, but you talked a lot about supplier diversity. What about continuing to advance the overall vision for the district in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Oh, sorry. Yep. Good point. Good point. So if you look at our strategic plan, the origin of that strategic plan was from the board that was constituted at the time. We created board goals. The district administration took those board goals and then converted them into the strategic plan. And so if you look at the strategic plan, it's all about equity. And it's not about just equity in, again, as I said before, getting Black or minority students up. It's about equity, about making sure we have all the processes and all the access to all students. If we raise, our belief is if we can raise the level of our Black students who seem to have the most struggles, we raise everybody, because we're not going to lower our expectations. We haven't lowered expectations. So it's not only equity for the students, but it's also equity in the folks that we hire and to retain. So we try to make a very diverse talent pool as much as we can. And then also hire based, not just on diversity. We're not hiring just on diversity, but we're hiring on the best candidate, but we try to increase the pool so that we at least have some options. And then the other piece that we do is involvement from the community. That was one thing we thought we didn't do as well before the strategic plan. And now we're involving the community more. I know that we brought on Dr. Eric Buchanan and Rivera to help lead the equity and diversity. That's totally new to the district, but that was one of the things we asked the administration to find, and they did, and she's been awesome. If any of you had a chance to meet her, she's been great. And so she's been bringing more community leaders, not just the parent council network, but other community leaders to the table in her community involvement. And it's changed the way certain people perceive Washington Township, because now they get an inside view and they get information that they may not get just from the public. So all those things are tied together as we try to build equity throughout the district.
Thank you so much, Bill. And turning it over to Terrence.
Good morning, Bill. My name is Terrence McWilliams. I have a daughter who graduated from North Central and a son who's a senior this year at North Central. So the question I have is, we value diverse populations within our district. How can we create more equitable outcomes for minority students so the outcomes match up with our strengths in diversity? Sorry.
No, it's fine. So part of, and I said this earlier on, but when we look at some of the challenges and with minority students, sometimes we tend to focus on one thing or another, but it's a mix of different things that happen to hold back or at least put barriers in front of a lot of our students. And so what we've been doing as a district is trying to add as many add-ons as possible. So, the referendum helped us add, classroom aides to break down so teachers don't have, to cover all 25 or 30, hopefully not 30. We're trying not to do 30, but all of their students in the classroom, they have support. So those that need a little extra help, they can get extra help. We have behaviorists that we've added to every school to help with those that maybe have challenges outside of school and bringing those inside. Obviously, you know about our free and reduced lunches so that kids have meals. And it's also about, as I mentioned earlier, trying to get a more diverse staff and leadership to help with that. Dr. Erica Buchanan Rivera has been a great add to the district because she's also helping teachers understand, you know, cultural responsivity to helping students. That has helped change the way that we're working equitably. Anyway, we're working across the board with all students. And I think it's a combination of things, and I can't point to one because it's not just one thing that we can do. But the bottom line is we will not lower expectations. We have to help students reach those expectations. I'll give you one more example for that as well. So it may not be what you consider equitable, but I think it's what we consider to be something that we're trying to help all students. I don't know how much you know about True North Academy, but True North Academy was formed several years ago and has been a great add to the district because True North Academy is for those students who are borderline either not going to graduate, or we know early on that on their path they're on, they're not going to get enough credits to graduate. And so they go to True North Academy where they get more attention. They're also, a lot of them either can work or they can go over to JL and learn a second career trade. But those students, and I'm going to use the word save because I really believe we're getting those students to graduate where they more than likely would not, whether it's attendance, whether it's, you know, tardies, whether it's just poor performance in the classroom. It could be even that they had some issues around in school, but getting them into an environment where we can, you know, control it a little bit better, give them more attention, give them a little flexibility, and making adjustments to the student, we get them to graduate. That's a program I tout all the time because Washington Township has that, and we do a very good job in that space.
Thank you.
I'm going to hop on and say we have about 10 minutes left.
Sorry, I talked too much. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
Good.
Good. My name is Karen. Sorry that I don't have my film on, but I have a teenage driver, so I have to kind of pay attention to him while he's driving.
Wow, you're a great dude. Go ahead.
Okay, but just I want to know, what do you think are the highest priority topics facing our district right now?
And this is going to sound like a cliche or a record or a broken record, but the first thing is safety of our students, right? And I say that in the sense of, obviously you see the news around the country, you see the news even within Indiana, but we want to make sure that the students are safe. And part of the referendum dollars are going to making our schools safer, as well as, you know, some of the referendum dollars helped us hire more SROs. And it's not SROs to make sure we police our kids, but SROs to make sure the schools are safe. So that's to the side. And then the other priority is helping all students grow and achieve, right? And it's broad, but it really covers how we govern our district. It's all about, what are we doing to help students who are struggling? What are we doing to help students who are excelling? What are we doing to make sure that our teachers have what they need in the schools to make these things happen? So it's kind of an all-encompassing thing. I can't, and when I say it, you know, achievement or growth, it covers so many things, but safety by itself, and then I think just the achievement and growth, that drives everything we do as a board.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us today, Bill. My name is Greg Aiken. I have a daughter at North Central, and I had a son that graduated and went through the Allisonville Eastwood North Central track.
Great.
You started to address this question on school safety, which is a concern for families. Are there anything that are additional strategies or resources that we as a district can do to kind of maintain safety or improve safety?
I think, you know, and you have to forgive me, I can't remember the exact years, but several years ago when we formed our own police force, our Washington Township Police Force, that was one of the keys to that forming that force is that we would have our own police department. And again, not a police department to monitor and, the kids, but police department to protect the district. And so what that has done, though, is it has grown over time to where that particular police force is really integrated with our city and county police force in order to helping, as far as communications, support from those different agencies to help make sure that we can do the best we can for the school. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, and as I said in the referendum, our schools have safety involved in, safeguards in them, such as, locked doors, et cetera. But we're elevating that. And if you go to our newer schools, you'll see it's quite a bit harder to get into a school. In the new schools, it's usually a double entrance where you can get in, come through one door, but you have to be let through another particular door to get in. That's going to be adjusted. North Central is probably the one school that's the biggest. Well, not is the biggest. It is the biggest, but it's the most that we have to cover in a particular building, and all the exits and the ways that you can get in the building. Those are things that we can consistently have our administration, our safety team look at how they can better secure those areas. And some of the things have happened. The video systems that we've installed are now upgraded to a better system internally for our schools and outside, so you can see the outside. The cameras have been upgraded or will be upgraded to more of an HD camera type of video, so we can actually see a lot of the detail. Those are the types of things that we're adding or improving, I should say, within our schools to make them safer from the outside. And then from the inside, it's really about, always preaching that and helping our teachers do what we can do to be safe inside as well.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes for last question and wrap up.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us. My name is Michelle Hardeman, and I have a daughter who is in the 7th grade. My question to you is, what do you consider to be the strengths of the district? And conversely, what do you feel are areas of improvement?
So I'm sorry, but there's an echo, and I think I heard the last piece was what areas of improvement, but I didn't hear what the first part of your question was. I'm sorry.
So I can repeat for you since there's an echo on your end. So what are the strengths of our districts, and where do we as a district need to grow or improve?
Okay. So I think I will start with areas that we need to grow and go to the strength side. And how I think we can make that growth better. So the areas need to grow, I've been saying it all this particular morning, is the growing, helping our students grow, getting them better. Now we always, we have the iLearn, we have all these tests that, the iRead, we have to learn how, get kids to proficiency in those. So to me, we're not there. And that's why we keep pushing as a board to make sure that we give the district all they need to try to make this happen. That to me is the biggest area of improvement. How we get there is based on our strengths. I think we have, great teachers. I know people outside of our district might say that, teachers are, we have all bad teachers. That's totally untrue. We have great teachers. We have great staff, all committed to the kids. We have great kids, right? We have great kids. Now there are some, obviously any population has some, but we have great kids. If you ever go in, I know you all are parents and you've been in schools, but as a board member, when we get a chance to go into schools and go into classrooms, in live action, the kids it's awesome in those classrooms, and people from the outside don't see that. We have great organizations such as the Parent Council Network, not to try to butter you up, but it's having parents, the voice of the parents in a district is huge. And then we also have community involvement. We have churches, we have, other organizations in the community that want to help with our schools. So I think as a district, we have a lot of strengths. And last, not least, I think right now, currently, we have a pretty strong school board. I think we have a board that's very diverse, a board that has different thoughts. And we have a board that really, truly believes that what we need to do is to focus on is the kids, our students in the district. And if we can do that, everything else will fall into place. And so those are the kind of things. Oh, and the strong community support of these referenda is another piece of our strengths, is that we have a community that supports our schools.
Thank you, Bill. Hi, I'm Tasha Harper. So I have a Wesleyan 7th grader. I've been co-chairing this committee with Crystal Pasco. So we first want to thank you for your service on the board. Thank you for the way you've stepped up and that you've continued to be an important and key member of the Washington Township School Board. The committee thanks you for your application. We thank you for your time this morning to talk with us and help us learn a little bit more about your passion. As we wrap up, we'd like to give you an opportunity to give us any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share with the committee. And we wanted to make sure you knew that if we have any follow-up questions, someone from the committee will reach out to you. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to the email that goes to Crystal and we will get back to you. But again, we thank you and we'll give you the opportunity to give us any closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you very much. First, the biggest closing remark is thank you again. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for being a part of the election process, the candidate selection process, because that's a big deal. Regardless if it's me or not, it's still a big deal. And we appreciate the parent support within our district all the time. The only other thing I would add is just, again, it's one of those things where, people say, well, Bill, you don't have any kids in the school district, you've been there a while, why you want to do it? It really is, again, the focus has always been, the reason I ran for the school board all those years ago was about helping as many students as I possibly could. And to me, being at the board level, you can help do that at a higher effective rate than you could in other places. And so that's why I ran for the board in the first place. That's why I've run for re-election, is to continue that work. This is one of the particular junction points where I see us finally, it's again, folks, it's not, the needle is not revving up to full speed by any means, but we're moving the needle, and I see us slowly chipping away at the barriers that can keep some of our students bumped back. And I want to continue to chip away at those and do the best we can for all students in the district. So that's, it sounds, it's a repeat. If you look at, heard me say these things before, it's the same, because I'm just telling you, that's what I focus on here at the district. So I appreciate your time, first of all, on a Saturday morning.
Thank you. We appreciate your time and have a great Saturday.
You too. All right. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, I think we have 3 minutes before the next interview, so we'll get started as soon as Kelly, will you be letting the next candidate in when we get closer to the time? Well, in a minute or two. Okay.
He just showed up in the waiting room, but
No.
I'm probably going to give everybody a bio break, a minute or two, and then we'll let him in right before 10:30.
Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
Kelly, I'm checking to see, am I going now?
You are still echoing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and admit Don.
Morning.
Good morning, Don. We're gonna just give it a 30 more seconds, 30, 60 seconds to let more people in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started.
Very good.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started with some general opening remarks. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Don and other school community members. Knowing your familiarity with PCN, we thought we would skip the history and just dive right into content and introductions. I will let you know the school board candidate committee. We have varying ages of kiddos in the district and represent several different schools within the township. As we go through, we will each introduce ourselves and let you know where our kids are, just to give you some context. At the very end of the series of questions, we will allow for you to have, make any closing remarks or comments. So you will have that opportunity at the end. And I think we'll get started. So my name is Sarah Strawbridge. I have 2 boys at Fox Hill Elementary. And we would like for you just, again, some of these introductory remarks we acknowledge were on your application, but we want to, for the others, joining us today to hear, again, just state your name, your connections to the district, any kids who are still in the system or just general connections to the township, and why you're running again.
Okay, very good. My name is Don Kite. That's the short name. It's Donald Bradley Kite Sr., if you want the full name. I am a parent, and I'm also a grandparent. My children all went through Washington Township kindergarten through graduation from North Central. No gaps in that. They didn't leave. We love the township. My wife years ago actually did research on different school districts. When I met her, she was living in Franklin. She's a Franklin girl, so her elementary, high school, and college were all, just a couple miles apart, all in Franklin. But she wanted to be somewhere else, wanted to raise our kids somewhere else, and we wanted to be in Indiana. I went to law school here and met her. Actually, it was like the night before law school started, so that was interesting. But so we wanted to stay in Indiana, and she was doing research on different school districts before it was quite as user friendly as it is now, when you would want to research different school districts. And she was researching different districts, and she thought Washington Township was what she wanted, and what she thought would be best for our kids. It is a diverse school district, which is not something I've just adopted now. That was important to us at the time. My wife is by genetics, I guess you'd say, half Korean by culture. Her mother was raised in Japan, and it was important to be a part of a place where not everybody was, just one demographic makeup or constitution. Just it wasn't what we wanted, because we realized that education is more than just the programming that's offered to your children. So all of my children have finished school. They're all, I don't know if you call them all adults. 2 of them are definitely adults. One's still brewing, but they're all, doing different things in the community. My daughter, like my wife, is an educator, and that's another reason she wanted to be in a district where she knew that you had educators who are not only well-trained, but who are, inspired about what they do. So that's why Washington Township was important. My connections, when I started here, I was involved in Dad's Club at Greenbrier, which is where our youngest started. And I was a Dad's Club president. I loved that. I loved doing the things that we did. We would host, reading nights at Greenbrier, and it was a simple event to put together for dads, but not a lot of chaos, although you might expect it with dads sometimes, I don't know. But we'd contact a book company, for example, and ask for posters and books to give out to the kids, and then we would stay all night with the kids and a bunch of dads, and it was just a fun event. So that's kind of how I became involved initially, and then some at the PTO at Greenbrier, but much less so. And as my kids, at least the oldest, went to West Lane, I was a PTO president there, and I loved being a part of West Lane. Again, I thought it was another great Washington Township school. My kids loved it. I think sometimes the middle school experience doesn't, because of what kids are going through then, doesn't necessarily give folks they don't have necessarily the greatest memories always of middle school, but I thought it was a great time. My kids learned a great deal, and we had great principles for our kids. And so I was involved in PTO there. Then the same at North Central. I was the PTO president there. I was the first male. I mentioned that because it's interesting, they haven't repeated that experiment too many times. I don't know what that says again about men and PTOs, but I think, I had a chance to work with wonderful women and men on a lot of different events. And I think we did a good job of getting a lot done for the school, for the teachers and administration. And we didn't take ourselves too seriously. We worked very hard, but we didn't take ourselves too seriously. They weren't used to, at the time, a male PTO president. I remember there was a big article in the North Central paper that the students put together, because when they presented me with, you had to pass this along to the next PTO president, the brooch. They have a Panther brooch. And of course, I talked about turning it into a belt buckle or something, but I didn't do that. But it was, working with great people. And I don't just say this, or I wouldn't have continued to do it. I just think this is an inspiring district, and I've loved being involved. So then I went into, working with Parent Council, and was president of Parent Council. It turned out a year before, really I was thinking about doing it, because the person who was scheduled to be, the president of Parent Council, PCN's predecessor organization, he said, well, this is just not for me this next year. So I went on to do that, and then continued, and then ran for the school board. And I was involved in a lot of committees before I did that, but ran for the school board, and I've continued to serve on the board, and I love being a part of it. So that's kind of my connections to the district, but I can answer any specifics too.
I was going to say, I think within your answer, I heard why you're running again, but maybe if you want to summarize.
Yeah, I apologize. Thank you very much. I appreciate the reminder. So I think it's a combination of reasons that I think are good for me to be on the board for the district, and then things that are important to me. Sorry if there's a little echo. I don't know if that's from me. First of all, I think that I'm an effective board member. I work extremely hard as a school board member. I've learned a great deal. It's not simply about learning curve, because people can surmount that, right? You can get past that eventually. So new board members can learn and be effective. But there is a time period on the board where it takes a while, and you're frankly learning names. A lot of folks have not necessarily been in all the schools in the district, or don't know that different schools have slightly different cultures as far as what they like, what they don't like. That's been a big part of the whole dress code discussion for a long time. Years ago, Greenbrier tried a dress code which was not particularly onerous. It was almost like a golf shirt and nice slacks and that kind of thing, to kind of equalize students, so that their impression of each other wouldn't be the haves and the have-nots. And so there's some differences that way, but I feel like I know a lot of that. I have a lot of institutional history from having been on the board. But beyond that, I know how to work in this district. I know how to work with the board and different board members, and I know how to work with the administration. And I think that But at the same time, and I don't know if this is going to be the subject of another question, so I'll keep this part short, but I feel like it is pretty clear that I am not just a yes person on the board. I'm not somebody who is just argumentative for argument's sake. I think that a skill that is important that not everybody has and not every candidate in this election or race will have is diplomacy. I've said before, and I don't want this to sound critical, I really do think you could, stand in one place and spin around in a circle, holding the expression doesn't sound that great, but, swinging around with a dead cat, you'd hit 10 smart people in Washington Township in pretty much any room you're in. There are an awful lot of smart, sharp people out there. And that's, I think, a great thing about the township, but finding somebody who has the skills as far as diplomacy and compassion and who's really going to do what they said they're going to do is harder than I think people think, to be really honest. So it is important for me. I think I bring a lot to this, but I also love being a part of the school board. Dr. Mervildi, and don't worry, I'm not going to quote a bunch of people and hopefully not bore you to tears, but Dr. Mervildi, the previous superintendent, used to say when he would introduce school board members to folks that school board members are like folks that ride motorcycles in the rain. They do it because they love it. And that's true. I mean, you would have to, even if you want to meet the minimum of what's expected of school board members, especially in a place like Washington Township. We tend to meet and discuss issues to the extreme compared to a lot of other districts. A lot of other districts will introduce it, vote on it the same night or what have you and all that. But we have, a series of meetings that goes on for a while. And that's a good thing. I'm not mocking it. But so I feel like I bring a lot to the position, and I feel like it is also something that I really want to do. So you have a combination of, I really believe, someone who's qualified, but also has what you need for that. I think it's clear, a lot of people can be anti-incumbent, but one thing that an incumbent does bring to you, rather than somebody who's trying to tell you what they think you want to hear, is I have a track record, it. And even if we've disagreed, on an issue, and you look over a list of names really quickly and try to think, has anybody here sent me, nobody in this group, particularly angry messages, but if they've disagreed, I think, I feel good about being in this district where the level of discourse is high. And I think that we discuss issues well. So thank you for the redirect.
Yeah, not a problem, Don. And I'm Stacia Murphy. I have a kid as a sixth grader in West Lane and formerly was at Fox Hill Elementary. I want to make sure, because we have a limited time with you, I want to make sure that people get to hear a few of your ideas and thoughts on a number of questions. So if we can speed up our answers just a little bit so that everybody can ask. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's not the easiest question, but if you can be brief, can you tell me how you plan to support and advance the district's vision of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Sure, absolutely. I think I have to start with what I've already done. I was one of the board members that insisted that the position, when we hired a director of equity and inclusion, and Dr. EBR has done and is doing a great job. I think she's one of those people that brings value to every meeting she attends and every initiative. But one of the important things was to make that cabinet level. There was some initial thought by the administration that didn't have to be cabinet level. And it wasn't so much that they didn't care about the end goal and what we're about, but it was a question, unfortunately, like a lot of things. You look at money, you look at all of that. So that's one thing I've already done. And I think that we have already been very clear as a board that we support social and emotional learning in the classroom, that we support doing everything that we can to hire more educators of color. I'm acutely aware of the fact that and I'm not just saying this to try to garner favor, the easiest thing to be in this society, I'm a white male. I get that. And I work very hard to, as the other board members have, I believe, especially this current set of board members, to try to do everything we can to increase the hiring of educators of color. We have very specific in our strategic plan, and I was a part of that, crafting that and then modifying it, over time, of establishing goals that are real as opposed to just aspirational goals. We should hire more educators of color. Anybody can say that, but it's really in what you do as opposed to just what you say. So we've tried to do more things and it's through the administration. Board members don't do the actual hiring, as you know. Board hires superintendent hires principals hire wonderful teachers. And so, part of the goal is to make sure that the superintendent knows what's important to us. And it's a lot of other things that we do with equity and inclusion that aren't even confined to the classrooms. Although in the classrooms, the board, then the superintendent, the principals, and the teachers have made our classrooms look a little bit more like our community. So that the only books that aren't there are that are in school libraries and elementary school classrooms, for example, aren't about George Washington chopping down a cherry tree, but there are books in our classrooms now that we haven't had them featured or out all the time about families and how families are different, and families of color, and cultural icons in different communities. And these are things that we're doing obviously very intentionally. Beyond that, the school board, and this was a school board initiative, it really was. And I think the administration would be candid about the fact that they weren't surprised, but they're very happy, very pleased that we've publicly indicated that it's very important that we hire many, many more than folks thought we would. Women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses for all the construction throughout the district. We're doing better than the airport. We're doing better than the city of Indianapolis. We're doing better than some local hospital projects. And that's intentional because it doesn't have to be that way. Initially, there was more emphasis or desire because of who they knew from the administration to hire a couple of companies that had been, to be blunt, courting us for years, and I think the board, and I was one of the people on the board, there were really two of us, in part, everybody supports this now, but there were really two of us that pushed it. And I, yes, was one of them that said, we have to do a lot better than that. We can beat any percentage. I don't want to hear about the minimum percentage of what the city of Indianapolis is doing. We can do more. And we've done that. So I was a part of all those interviews. We'll continue to do a lot of those things. We'll continue to push hiring, educators of color. And it's not as simple as some people would suggest, obviously, of going to HBCUs. If you listen to Malcolm Gladwell's explanation of how families and educators of color we've had trouble getting educators of color because of kind of the feeling beyond Brown versus Board of Education. The African American community, many educators of color were forced out of public schools, and that's not an easy thing to recover from. And I think if you listen to Malcolm Gladwell's explanation, he says very effectively that that's something that's not been forgotten in a community, which again, I realize I'm not a part of, but I can learn the lessons that other people teach me. And that's what we've, as a community and as a school board, continue to advance.
Thank you so much, Don. Turning it over to Terrence.
Good morning, Don. Thank you for your thoughts there. My name is Terrence McWilliams. I'll be really quick. I have two kids, one a recent graduate of North Central and a son who is a senior this year. You've kind of touched a little bit on this with your previous explanation, but obviously a diverse population is something that we value here in the district. Can you talk a little bit about, with a little more specificity, around how you would create more equitable outcomes for minority students as a result of, all of the DE&I work that you guys have done?
Sure, absolutely. So we're doing several things, obviously. Equitable outcomes, there are obviously every community member in our educational community has been affected by a number of things that we've talked about before. We've talked about, learning loss. I don't mean in this gathering today, but I mean in other permutations and gatherings throughout the township and otherwise. There's been learning loss, obviously, as a result of the pandemic, but even more specific and going way back before the pandemic, we've obviously had the same issue with the achievement gap that a lot of other school districts throughout the country have experienced. And it is something that we have tried to address and will continue to address in the future. Part of the answer, and it's only part of the answer, right, is to acknowledge that there's an issue and to talk about it openly. So we do an awful lot, as all of you know, in this district with disaggregating data, pulling it apart and looking at how, what seems to be working in different schools at different levels throughout the district. There will be a spike, for example, in scores with Caucasian and African American students, both groups doing much better in a particular subject, math, for example. There was a fourth grade math jump a few years ago. And we have educators who are trained and administrators who are educators and been around sometimes longer, sometimes not, who are trained in these areas and statistics and such, trying to find what exactly has made the difference. So they obviously know, we all know, that part of it is best practices, however you dress it up, whatever you call it, is the things that teachers do every day that make a difference for all the students. Part of it is discipline, and we've taken real and effective steps with discipline. It puts some pressure on educators, obviously, but the number of referrals have been reduced. There's been a good deal of education of our educators so that there's not, the same level of referrals, office referrals, suspensions and such for so-called offenses, and I put that in quotes, single quotes, so-called offenses like disrespect and things like that, that oftentimes is a misinterpretation of a child who's trying to express something else. And so I think that there's been an awful lot, and there will continue to be an awful lot of education of our educators about culturally responsive practices and social emotional learning. There's an effort, instead of punishing all of the time in our schools, to try to engage in restorative practices so that, we can try to get folks on the same page, understanding each other, and just doing something as simple on occasion as saying sorry, or understanding why that step that a child took is the wrong step, is the wrong approach. So there's a lot of those things. Behavior matters. Having our educators learn something that many of them have done a good job, for years, obviously, but there are also folks who, like all of us, all of us who call ourselves at least, lifelong learners, we benefit from folks processing things for us differently, giving us information we didn't have. So there's an awful lot of that. There are grade level teams that dig into data, which matters. They've done things in the past like targeting, and I think we'll do the same kind of thing in the future. It's not just a retrospective, but targeting specific students who are in danger of failing and working, having a specific adult mentor work with those students. So there are a lot of different things that we've done. There's also all of the interventions. Because we have a school district that is focused on and is focusing more, and will be focusing more in the future on professional learning communities. We have a lot of folks who are learning a lot about data and what to do with data that they didn't necessarily do as much in the past. So, part of the goal has been not to make teachers islands when they're dealing with these issues, or some people think of them as being in silos, and to have them work together. So they're able to process this and learn what works. We have interventionists do this. We have teacher coaches. There are a lot of different approaches and things that we're working with right now. And I don't know if that answers completely your question, but the commitment is there, the money is there, there's grant money there that's supported a lot of these efforts, ESSER and other funds that are helping now and helping to make a difference. And we've had a couple of board meetings that have focused on some successes, even though it's early on with some of this. The district has seen some remarkable levels of achievement and success in different classrooms and different programs. So we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was remiss and did not do my 10-minute warning. So I am going to now do about a 5-minute, maybe a little bit less. So perhaps Karen, you had the next question. So maybe your question and then some wrap up.
Sounds good. Hi, Don. My name is Karen, and I currently have a junior at North Central, and I had two daughters that previously years ago graduated from North Central. But my question to you is, what do you think is the highest priority that our district is facing today?
That's so hard, as you know, especially for somebody who tends on the verbosity scale like to be higher like me. I think that the achievement gap is I really believe that's probably the highest priority for a couple of reasons. So I hope you don't think I'm cheating with my answer. One, it's important because there is a difference between our students of color and our white students as far as achievement. And that's something that we can't allow to happen or to continue for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, one, it's our mission and it's our passion to try to educate every single student that walks in our doors. That's easy to say, but I mean it. The board means it. I think you probably know that all of you mean it and want that as well. Two, it's just the right thing to do. It offends anybody with any kind of moral sensibility that you could have different systems, systemic issues that aren't properly rooted out and dealt with, or even different outcomes. And you know, Dr. Mervilli, again, to quote him twice the same thing, I don't know how that came together, but he used to say, you know, we don't control everything, but we control enough. So we need to do that. It is not only a huge problem for the reasons that I've mentioned that we need to address and continue, and we're doing that in a whole bunch of different ways, some of which I've mentioned, but it's also because it creates a perception problem as well, right? I mean, so the candidates that are coming this time on the other side from, you know, very well financed candidates, you know, in terms of those who want to privatize schools, who want to, you know, burn the house down and all that, start over. The rhetoric that you're going to hear from them in this election is this school board doesn't care about its students of color. And that's just not the case. It is true that there continue to be differences in outcome, and that is something that shouldn't happen. And we're doing everything that we can to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I think an honest person would have to acknowledge that there's an awful lot we've done already and that we have in force now. I want to be around it to see that through its conclusion, and not its conclusion like, you know, as you know, in society, we're never fully done, but I want to see it through to a point beyond where it is now. We have a lot of things in place that are addressing these issues, but folks are going to try to make a lot of the difference. And just hearing from them that, yeah, just hearing the answer that our white students are doing so much better, so that makes the achievement gap harder to resolve, is not an answer. I mean, we all know that, you know. So I think that what we have in place right now and what we're talking about and what we're continuing, and you know, Dr. EBR would tell you, we're just at the beginning of a lot of this. And there are some people who are resistant to having the conversation and think that we spend too much time on this issue. I don't. I really sincerely don't. And I think if you ever listen to school board meetings, and I know it's not necessarily everybody's favorite level of or type of entertainment, but if you do, I think that you would hear us talking about these issues a lot, and not just talking, but really implementing programs, ideas, and hiring people to make a difference.
Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, Don. I'm Twasha Harper. So I have a 7th grader at West Lane, and myself, along with Crystal, are the co-chairs of the committee. So first, we want to thank you for your service on the school board.
Thank you.
We realize that has not always been the easiest place to be in the last couple of years, but we do thank you for your service and your sacrifice in many ways. We thank you for your application. We thank you for taking time this morning to go through our questions and provide your insights and vision about the school board and the next stages of the Washington Township. We would like to provide you an opportunity as we wrap up to give us any closing comments. And if you have any questions after the process, feel free to reach out to the email that Crystal has provided, and we'll make sure someone from the committee gets back to you. And likewise, if the committee has any questions, we'll make sure that we reach out to you as well. So again, we thank you, and we'll allow you some time to give us some closing comments.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will keep this shockingly short. And, you know, those who know me generally and those who've been here today, thank you very much for your time on a Saturday. I know and appreciate how busy all of you are. I really do. I've tried to do my best to explain in a short amount of time where I'm coming from and what I think and about why I hope you'll endorse me for the District 2 spot for the school board this time. I think it is more complicated. Some would summarize it as an incumbent, not the time for incumbents. This should all be new people. And I think that I understand that sentiment, but I also think that this is, and I'd say this emphatically, not a time for a switch to someone who is untested or who, and I'm not talking about any specific person, but you know, you guys know the track records of the folks who are in front of you, and whether you have different folks who have stuck with the things that they have set out on, the path that they've set out on, or the different programs they've been a part of, or the initiatives. And I think it's important that you know where I've been, you know how hard I work on the school board. I have 2 meetings scheduled with teachers this next week. They're, off the grid meetings because I try to be responsive and I incorporate what I learn. I'm very careful not to out people when they're they're the person that provides a specific type of information to me. And I meet with people all the time, and I'll continue to do that. So I'm a known quantity. It's not as simple as please endorse me because I'm an incumbent. What I'm suggesting is, you know who I am, you know how hard I work, how hard I'll continue to work. I have just as much passion for the district today as I did day one years ago when I ran the first time. And you've seen that I'm not a rubber stamp, which is, I know, a question that parent councils asked in the past. I've voted in favor of a number of different proposals by the administration. I've also voted against some. I thought that the North Central 2020 idea that the administration proposed was a very bad idea, and it was a solution in search of a problem. So I voted no on that. 2 other members of the board came with me on that. I know it's not always popular to talk about COVID restrictions because folks' ideas change over time, but for me, it was more important to protect, our students, our educators, administration, parents, their families, whether folks were immune compromised or not. And so I voted in favor of more strict COVID restrictions and continuing for longer. That is something that we typically had the majority of the board agreeing with because we were in a unique situation and we did the best we could with that. But frankly, I reached the conclusion that there are politics everywhere. There are politics in health departments, and there are different standards by different departments. So I will continue to do just that. I will research issues, work very hard if I don't know enough about an issue already. I don't pretend, like a lot of people sometimes feel, that they're the smartest person in the room. I think of myself as the person who's not the smartest person in the room, but I work the hardest, or I'm one of the people who works the hardest. So I'll continue to do that. And I hope that you'll consider me for your endorsement. And I thank you again for your time.
Thanks so much. And I also just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of the parents and educators and other folks who joined us to listen in this morning. There are lots of things you could have been doing on a beautiful Saturday morning like today, and we really appreciate you making time to be here. If you are on our committee, please hang around because we're going to start deliberating. Folks who have listened in, thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, and kind of next steps from here. I should say that before I tell everyone goodbye.
Should I jump off now? I don't want to get in if there's.
Yeah, Don, I think you can go ahead and jump off, and we'll follow up with you afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you folks so much.
So to make sure that we have given enough time for our considerations and just being aware of everybody who might be considering running for school board, the parent council meeting that normally happens on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, which would have been August 17th, is now moved back to August 24th. At 7 p.m. It is at Northview Middle School. I cannot remember the room number at the moment, but we have that on our social media for you. So we would love to have you there. That's where this committee will make their recommendation to the Parent Council Network voting membership on who they support for Parent Council endorsement, and then voting members will vote on that. So you can look for that meeting as your place to find out more about the committee's decisions. And if you have any questions between now and then, don't hesitate to reach out to the Parent Council Network. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your Saturday.